The Pulse of Providence with Steph Machado on WPRI.com.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of Pulse of Providence. I'm Steph Machado, and we have an episode today about the topic that is on everybody's minds right now, especially if you're a parent, a kid, a teacher. Are schools reopening this fall, and what is it going to look like? And I want to welcome our guest, the top education official in the state, Angélica Infante-Green, the Commissioner of the Rhode Island Department of Education. Commissioner, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So today, we're taping this on Friday, July 31st. Today is the deadline for districts to put their reopening plans up on their websites. Now, this is still the three different scenarios, so it's not like we're finding out today if schools are reopening, right? We've got the full in-person scenario, the hybrid, a couple different hybrids, and the full distance learning. I'm wondering, you have the most direct control over what happens in the Providence schools because of the state takeover, and this is a show about Providence. So I want to know, as of today, as right now, do you think it is likely that Providence school children, all 24,000 of them, are going to go to school in a classroom on the first day of school?
I think we're going to have a variety. Today is the day that it's due. Some of them will not be able to post, and we have given them permission not to post today because some of the plans have gotten significant feedback, and we want people to get it right. We've learned that it's really important for the community to see something that reflects their voice. So I think that's important for us. Will all the kids be back? I don't think so. What I think is that parents have a choice. Some parents do not feel comfortable, and they will have a choice of either having their child go online or in person. And we have heard, I can't tell you how many emails I get a day from parents who say, I need my student to go back, my child to go back, because they didn't benefit as much from distance learning, or this is our situation, or I'm afraid and I don't want my child to go back. So what we know that we have to do, and it is our responsibility as a state and as Providence, to provide that choice for parents.
And I want to ask you about that because, you said this at the weekly coronavirus briefing on Wednesday, and the governor did too. The governor said no one's going to be forced to go back to school. You said, there's going to be options. A lot of districts were planning to have virtual options for if you were immunocompromised or you live with someone who's high risk. They weren't necessarily thinking they would be offering that to anyone who wants it, which is a whole different ball game, right? You could have half the families say we want distance learning, and then that really shifts your staffing. So is this something that districts are going to have to figure out, or is the state okay? Because if the state's the one sort of making this promise that you're going to have this option, but is there thoughts of a state virtual learning academy or something coming down from the state, or is this the district going to have to figure this out?
Well, I think it's complicated because some districts did submit plans where they would have this option, right? So it's not that we're the only ones saying it. A lot of districts did a really great job of putting it in their plan and really putting out RFPs to bring in providers. I would love to have a statewide, but we don't have the money to do that right now, right? But the districts have that obligation to the families to provide a quality instruction regardless of whether it's in person, at the brick and mortar, or online.
And, even in Providence, which is, the district that the state has direct control over, Superintendent Peters at the school board meeting earlier this week, he kind of hedged. He said, we're trying to offer this to all families, but I can't promise that. And why is that? Is that because you have to figure out the staffing? I mean, if you have half the kids in every classroom decide to be virtual, I mean, you still have to have the teacher to staff that classroom, and you have to have the teacher to teach virtually. So logistically, how does this work if you're going to promise this option?
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. I have to be honest. But we wanted, and we will be responsive to the community. We just have to be innovative and think out of the box. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to be flexible. And when I say we, I mean the entire community at large. It may not look like what we thought it would look like, But we, in order to keep our commitment, we're going to have to think out of the box. We are. And it may be that for the high school in Providence, we do virtual. And it may not be we have prioritized elementary and in Providence, K to 8, right? We have prioritized that as well as ninth grade. So there's priorities as we do this work.
Do you think 10th, 11th, and 12th graders in Providence should prepare themselves now that they're virtual learning full time?
That's a possibility. But what we're trying to do is give them even better options. So we're working on something that we'll be able to release in the next 2 weeks that is going to give them, that parents are going to be excited about, the students are going to be excited about. I think we're trying to solve for a very big problem in taking advantage of this situation to provide families with bigger options than we were able to provide prior to this pandemic.
Do you anticipate giving teachers the option of teaching in a virtual learning setting the same way that you would give that option to families? Because we hear a lot of teachers are worried about their exposure risk.
Yeah, we are prioritizing teachers that are at risk. That's the priority right now. And it's all going to be determined on just a lot of factors. But right now, we have surveyed teachers that have an underlying disease or are immunocompromised. So we're putting health and safety first, right? And what that looks like, I can't tell you right now.
But you can't promise teachers that if they feel it is not safe to be indoors with 15 to 30 people in a room, you can't promise them that they'll be able to teach from home.
What I can say is that we'll figure out a way to work with the teachers. I can't say anything right now because these things are evolving, right? What I say today may be different than Monday. That's the reality of this situation, right? I do know that whatever we do, there's going to have to be a lot more professional development for teachers. I think there's going to have to be a lot of support. Everything is going to look different. So it's going to be reinventing a lot of things for us as an education community.
The virtual learning and all that you described as being a nightmare. Another logistical nightmare has been the busing. It does sound like a lot of districts have been surveying parents saying, can you drive your kid to school? And a lot of parents are saying yes, which is probably helping, but that's not going to be the case in Providence or urban communities where a lot of people don't have cars. I think in the suburbs, most parents have cars. So is there any update on how that's going? I mean, are you getting cooperation? The other problem is we use third-party bus companies. Providence doesn't have its own buses. Are you getting cooperation from the bus company? Do they want anything in exchange for finding more buses or drivers or doing more routes?
No. So we are getting cooperation. I think the challenge that we have is that we only have 2 bus companies. So that is something that in the future we're going to have to solve for. The second challenge is that they don't have any more buses. It's not even that can we give them something there are no more buses, and there's a challenge of bus drivers. So there are many different layers to this situation. So that's why we have asked parents if they can. That would be great, especially if parents feel nervous about putting their kids on a bus, whatever the case may be. But we're looking for alternate solutions. But we'll know better once we know who's coming back and who's not. I think it's gonna be a different type of conversation.
Right. So there's a lot of things that have to happen in a really short time, right? You're going to make the decision about if schools are reopening. Parents have to tell their boss, okay, my kid's going to be home on Wednesdays and Fridays, so now I need those days off.
Well, we're not doing so, Steph. So one of the things that I need parents to know, we heard loud and clearly that this alternate day is a problem, right?
Okay.
So we have been working with the districts. That's why plans can't. This is evolving. I've had parents that said, well, how do I do this? Right? Like, how do I figure this out? And how is this beneficial for my child? So we're working through all those things. Like A and B day has been a topic of contention. So we are working with the districts to figure out who we prioritize. And that may mean that high school looks different, that middle school looks different. I think we need this time right now to gather that information and figure out. That's why the districts need a little more time.
Well, and let me ask you about that, because the A and B day seem to be the prevailing theory, even before that July 17th deadline to get the draft plans in, school districts were sending emails home to parents, and they were telling parents in Zoom forums, we're going to do A and B day. Your kid's going to be in school 2 days a week and at home 2 days a week. And then Monday is going to be everyone's at home day. And this was before, this was before they even submitted the draft plans. It was almost like the full in-person scenario was just not even being considered. So it sounds like you're not okay with that. And
No.
what can you do? What level of autonomy do the districts have, putting Providence aside because they don't have autonomy, but what kind of autonomy do the districts have to decide what they're going to do, or how much can RIDE tell them, no, you cannot do this?
Well, I think what's challenging is that we in the education business, we serve the community, right? If the community does not think that that's going to work, then we have to find a happy medium. And we heard loud and clearly, before those plans even came to us, I have been bombarded with emails. The governor has been bombarded with emails saying this is just not going to work. And then it becomes an equity issue, right? Some parents can't stay home. Some parents cannot stay home. Where does that happen? So there's a lot of things that still need to be worked out. But I think when we said that parents will have the discretion, that changes the conversation, right? It changes who comes back, who doesn't come back. So if a district was planning for 1,000 students, and then let's say 300 parents decide that their kids will do distance learning, then now the district has to plan for 700. So it's a different kind of planning, right? I think that that's part of why the shift and why we need a little more time to get this down. But what we do know that districts are required, if you saw the metrics, that they be ready, right? That they be ready. We've always been saying that for whatever case scenario, that we put safeguards in place. And I think that's what people need to look at, is also what are the safeguards that are going to be in place if I decide to send my student back, or if all those ifs. What are the things that you need to see in place to feel more comfortable? Some parents already feel comfortable. So I think in terms of the jurisdiction, I think we're working together as a state. That's what sets us aside from other states and has from the very beginning. So I don't think we're even having those conversations. What we're having is how do we solve for what's happening in each district and how can we provide them support?
And so by offering the virtual learning option to any family that wants it, you're effectively lowering the class sizes for
Correct.
Who's going to be in
Correct.
person, and that might allow more grade levels to be fully in person than what was previously.
That's
planned.
right.
Because you got a lot of those plans that showed up in your inbox. Even the full in-person plans, Bristol Warren said, we're not doing full in-person for high school, straight up. So was that I guess, what was your reaction to that? You said, well, I told you to try and make a plan for full in-person.
Well, we did tell everybody to try and do it, and everybody has gotten feedback about what our expectations are. We were pretty clear in our expectations. We didn't tell them that which one we were going to enact, but our expectation was that there was a plan for each one of the 4 scenarios. That was important to us. And, we're going back and forth. We've already given feedback to everyone. We've already started receiving plans coming back with revisions. So we're working through all this. We've been working diligently. So not trying was not an option. It's figuring it out, right? And in everybody's defense, this is very complex, right? Nobody's ever done this. So I want everyone to, as hard as it is, to understand that everybody's trying to do their best, right? Everybody's trying to figure this out. And that's how we want to approach it. But we are asking districts to figure out the 4 scenarios.
Would you consider pushing the first day of school back at all because of all this planning that might need to do? You might need to wait until you get responses from all the families and sort out what class and what bus you're going to be on. Is that a consideration to change the first day?
It might be. Yes, it might be, because we have plans, but plans are going to need to shift. I have said from the very beginning that we have to be flexible. My goal is for us to be successful. And if I need to move things, if we need to move things, we will. because this is about students, this is about their education, this is about teachers, this is about us as a community. And in order to be successful, we have to do the right thing. And if that means pushing things back or bringing in teachers first, we're going to work through all of those things because all those things are on the table.
And are you committed to having a 180-day school year, or could pushing the date back reduce the length of the school year?
We're working through that right now, to be honest. But all that we're considering. We're considering, the calendar may start later. The days may look different. There's a lot of things that we're trying to put into the pipeline, but we'll know more in a week or so. To be honest with you, a week or so, if we sit down again, I can give you details.
You and I have talked multiple times about students with IEPs. A lot of them get specialized services that were really hard to provide virtually in the spring. Are you committed to having students with special needs with IEPs back in the classroom, like 100%?
Absolutely. That has been a priority population from the very beginning. We have heard from parents that it doesn't work for all the kids. We know that. We know that. Unless we can't come back, we are planning to have this population in person. That is really important to us. We've heard it. And we want our kids to get what they need. And we will put in the safety measures. And we welcome any conversation around that, but we have made that commitment. Unless we cannot come back because of the numbers. Let me make that clear.
So unless the Department of Health says you can't even open the doors.
Right.
You're opening the doors even for a very limited hybrid. Those kids can come back to school unless their parents don't want them.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And multilingual learners, not just them, but multilingual learners as well.
Multilingual learners will have an in-person option.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about the Providence turnaround a little bit because this is a show about Providence in particular. That's all happening in the midst of trying to teach virtually and figure out if kids are even going back to school. Earlier this week, there were some new hires in the district. There were 4 principals that were hired. They replaced a couple principals that had been removed from their jobs, either demoted to assistant principal or moved elsewhere in the district. All 4 of the new principals are from out of state, from Boston to Kansas. You hired a state turnaround superintendent from out of state. Is this by design? Are you trying to, what is the reason for hiring so much leadership that is not from within Rhode Island?
I don't think it's intentional. I think we put out a call, and these were the people that actually rose to the occasion. We had a very, very extensive process to interview people. It was, I think, 4 sessions. They had to do a project. The community also vetted them. So this wasn't us just making a decision. This was an entire process. And they were the ones that came out on top. We had our internal teams. We had another layer. We had the community. We're just looking for people that are able to deliver. That doesn't mean that local people are not part of this process and can't and won't be selected to continue to be part of this process. Most of the principals that we have now, a good 90%, are from Providence. So I think, I know that it looks like that, but 4 new ones compared to, the other 17 that we have, or 16, depending on some buildings may have 2, I think it's a drop in the bucket, right? So I think that we have to start looking at what do we want to do to change what's happening, and it's also an opportunity for us to grow the talent that is here, because there is a lot of talent, but we're just going to be working differently, right? We need some people that can see that, move in that direction, and that's a challenge. And these people just happen to be from outside. That doesn't mean that we didn't interview people. And I just want to make clear that we've also created positions that were filled by local people, right?
Right.
I think that's one of the first moves. I also know that Sue Chin is also, local. So yeah. I don't want it to become outside, inside. It's a conversation about us getting stronger as a community of educators.
Another piece of schools news this week was the city is looking for a $140 million school construction bond. The city council, again, we're taping this on Friday, and the city council is going to vote on this bond tonight. They put out a list of possible projects, which include a new school, K through 8 school that you told us about before, and also some swing space at the windmill school. So It seems like we're getting closer and closer to a situation where decisions are being made about closing school buildings.
Yep.
When will that come? And have you decided which school buildings are just not worth fixing?
I think we're almost there. A lot is going to depend on the bond, right? A lot is going to depend on how quickly we can move. But we've never had swing space. That is a game changer for us, right? But it's going to cost money to fix the swing space. So that changes a little bit the timeline on things. But we need to make investments, long-term investments in our school system, in our buildings. And I think this is a first step. And there will be schools that will be, or not schools, but buildings that will be offline that we just don't see working for us as a whole city plan. I think I've been very clear that I believe in K to 8 schools. That doesn't mean that every school will be a K to 8 school. I think we have to do better in the middle schools. We have huge middle schools. So there's a lot that we are going to get ready to present, but a lot of it is dependent on the bond and money and how fast we'll be able to move. But we are getting a building. We're really excited about that we intend to make a K to 8 building, the first in Providence. So it's a good time. Work has continued to move even though we're in a pandemic.
And so if you open that school in the St. Joseph's Hospital building, which schools, like which kids from which schools would go there?
Well, we're figuring that out, right? I think what we have learned during this pandemic is we transport kids all over the city, right? And we have to be very strategic about what kids will go there, what it will look like, what type of school. So all those things are being worked out at this present moment. Because it will take a little time, we do have that time, and we want to be really smart about the direction that the district will go in. So I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. How does the pandemic impact the school construction and the attempts to renovate and use the swing space and build a new school? I mean, we don't even know if the school's buildings are going to be open.
Well, if the school buildings are not open and construction is still allowed to happen, then we're going to take advantage of that time and move a little faster. Our timeline will be faster. So we'll see. We just hope that that industry is allowed, that we're in a good place, that that industry is allowed to continue to work, because that would be in our benefit.
Going back to the school reopening, another thing that was said on Wednesday was that masks are going to be mandatory in school. There had previously been talk about you could take your mask off when you're in the classroom, when you're in your stable pod. How do you do mandatory masking in schools? Would you send a kid home if they don't wear a mask?
No, absolutely not. That's what we're being very clear about. If a child comes in, or a student, comes in without a mask, you provide them with a mask. There's no mask shaming. There is no, that's not what we're doing, right? This is about health and safety. This is not, you don't have it, so you go home. No, this is where we, as the adults, the people that are running the school system, have to step up and say, okay, here we have it, just like everywhere else. Here, grab a mask. You might have forgotten yours. Kids forget pencils. We give them pencils all year. So I think that's just part of our new process.
And that obviously goes to the money issue, because schools are trying to get a supply of masks and all sorts, hand sanitizer and all sorts of other supplies. And we're hearing from superintendents that they don't have enough money. Is there more money coming? Can you squeeze anything else out of federal grants, or can the state allocate more money? I mean, how are districts going to be able to afford this?
So we do, the governor's office does have some masks. So we will be distributing masks the same way we will be distributing thermometers. I think that there's a big push and initiative in that part. Do we have more money? Not right now. We just don't, right? And that's why it's one of the metrics. Do we have the supplies that we need to be able to open up the building safely, right? Those are the conversations that we're having, and that's going to be part of our checkoff. But that's our responsibility as educators and as leaders in the education field to provide that for the schools. We are hoping, we keep hearing that there will be more money coming our way. And I think the federal government understands that we do need more money. Like right now, superintendents are very hard pressed to do what they need to do if we don't get additional funds.
All right, that is all the time we have. Commissioner Angélica Infante-Green, thank you so much for joining me on the Pulse of Providence, and for everyone else watching, we'll see you next time.